Jay's Custom Creations is sponsored by Bits and Bits. Use the code JBates to save 10% off your next router bit or CNC bit purchase at bitsbits.com. I'd like to start off this project by confirming what most of you already think, and that is the fact that I am an idiot. I can't read a tape measure apparently and did not paint enough of this panel, so that means I had to come back and paint some more, which didn't quite blend well with the original paint that I did, so I had to paint the entire thing all over again twice. Yeah, I didn't save any time by painting this on the front end. All of the solid wood for this project is white oak, and I used to be allergic to this stuff. 2016, I had nose surgery, deviated septum, all kinds of sinus infections, blah, blah, blah. All that's behind me, and problems are pretty much solved with my sinuses. I worked with this whole project and never had a sinus infection, didn't have any sinus issues at all, so yay for that. For me, the milling process starts by cross-cutting to a rough length at the miter saw station first, followed by jointing one wide face at the jointer, then going to the planer to plane the opposite wide face flat and parallel, and then back to the jointer for one narrow face. Now I always go jointer, planer, jointer because this allows you to orient the board with any one of the wide faces up against the fence, therefore ensuring that you're going to joint downhill. Sometimes if you do a wide face, narrow face immediately at the jointer, you're forced to joint in the uphill direction, which is just a recipe for tear out. Then the pieces are ripped to their final width at the table saw, which I believe was 1.5 inches in width, and then cross cut to another rough length at the miter saw. And I thought I was doing myself a favor here by gang cutting all of these, but I was an idiot once again and failed to cut these dead center on each one of these boards. I just eyeballed it thinking it'd be okay, but the next step is cutting integral dowels on the ends of the pieces, and half of these were one length, the other half was another length. They were pretty darn close. But all that means is that the dowels were two different lengths. Not the end of the world on this particular project, but some of them were a little bit too long to go on the top row where the French cleat will be. You might be able to understand that when the project nears completion. But yeah, I'm an idiot number 2. Using the vertical table on a CNC machine to cut joinery is something that I find incredibly fascinating, and also very, very rewarding because it's CNC precise, so there's no guesswork. It's just perfect. I love that. For the third trip back to the miter saw, I'm cutting to the final length here. And the final length has to be the actual length of the arm, not the arm plus the dowel. So I set up a little intermediate stop block there to reference off of the correct piece of the material and not the dowel. A simple taper is all I'm after here, just to make these brackets or shelf pins, whatever these are called. I wanted to make them just appear a little bit lighter, so just a very simple taper. Tapering jig at the bandsaw with another block to hold the material down because I do not want to get my fingers that close to that particular blade. Well, any blade in general, but that one's pretty intense. The bandsaw leaves kind of a rough face, so I used a horizontal belt sander to smooth that face, and while I'm here I decided to just go ahead and freehand all of the roundovers on all of the exposed edges. Doing this kind of leaves it a little bit more of a created appearance rather than a manufactured appearance, if that makes any sense. Instead of using a roundover bit where all of the edges will be the same uniform roundover. 4 shelves, 2 pieces for the French cleat system, and then another offset piece or spacer piece to go on the bottom. All of that needed to be cut, so I went ahead and set up a time lapse to just run through the milling process once again. And I thought it was pretty cool. This is a good example of the assembly table being the center hub in the workflow wheel. This assembly table is surrounded by 6 stationary power tools, and I used all 6 stationary power tools around it for this little time lapse here. The miter saw station, the jointer, the planer, the bandsaw, the table saw, and the router table that's in the wing of my table saw. Because this is going to be in a hallway where we constantly walk around it, I don't want any sharp corners on these shelves, so I used one of these templates and a patterning bit or a flush trim bit in the router table to transfer I believe it was a 5/8 of an inch radius to the outside most corners on all of the shelves. Because of the radius that I put on the shelves, I could not really freehand the radius round over on top and bottom of the shelves. So for that process, I did set up I believe it was a 1/4 inch, maybe it was 3/16 of an inch radius round over bit at the router table. Shellac is the finish of choice for all of the white oak pieces, and shellac is one of those finishes that it's an old finish that never gets old, if you know what I'm saying. It's just so easy to apply, it's easy to repair if you ever need to do that, and it dries fast, and there's just so much that I love about shellac. Applying it though, I'm using a pair of those nitrile gloves, I think I'm saying that right, with a white glove on top of that glove on one of my hands. I get a lot of these white gloves from casters of all things. I buy a pack of casters on Amazon and they come with white gloves. I've got a pile of these gloves that I don't know what to do with. They're just random white gloves. So I thought, why not use the glove as a rag? Kind of like a very ergonomical approach to applying finish. And while it did work all right, you just end up wearing out your fingertips on the gloves and have to rub the back of your hand on the pieces after a while, which is kind of awkward. So nice in theory, not that practical in practice. I did want the holes to be perfectly spaced and symmetrical and all that stuff. So rather than setting up a grid pattern with a chalk line and then using a drill bit, which is what I used on my first assembly table, I just used the CNC machine here. And what do you know, it had a big goof up in the middle of one of the cuts. It failed to lift the Z-axis and then it just shot off to the side, and I got some error message about my computer setup. Very frustrating, kind of annoying. What I ended up doing though, I wanted to salvage this piece, so I used some blue tape inside the hole to establish the shape of the hole, and then I packed in some wood filler into the spot where the CNC messed up. Well, the CNC didn't mess up, the computer messed up. And then I sanded that back and touched it up with some red paint, and you never know it was there on the final result. Got all the pieces cut, or all the holes cut, and realized about halfway through that compressed air was the way to go to get all this dust and crap off of the surface as I'm cutting. I didn't want to use the dust shoe because I didn't want the bristles on the dust shoe to mess up the not cured paint. So compressed air was definitely the way to go. Again, I didn't want to mess up the finish, so I'm using a piece of paper with a hole in it to act as kind of a barrier between the router and the fresh paint, so that way I could add a round over, a 1/8 of an inch round over to all of the holes. Here's another I'm an idiot moment. I'm showing you these pre-drilled holes. I countersunk some holes, and I like to do the countersink on both sides of the piece here. That way when you put the screw through this into the second material, that second material is going to kind of mushroom out a little bit. And if you put a countersink on both sides of the first piece, that gives a little bit of a recess for that mushroom to go to, and the board's, kind of pulled together better, I think, in my opinion. But as soon as I put it up against the plywood, I realized that my eyeballed holes from the beginning, or from the first step, were just right in the middle of the dowel holes. So, oops, I had to drill more holes. Luckily, it's just a French cleat, so it doesn't really matter. If by chance you're not familiar with what a French cleat is, it is probably the best way to hang stuff, in my opinion. You make two boards with a matching angle cut on them, and you mount one to the back of your material, one to the wall, and then you just simply just hook your piece over the cleat that's mounted on the wall. It's just a fast, easy way to hang stuff on the wall. Of course, the thickness of the cleat that you use has to be matched at the bottom side of the panel so that the panel itself remains parallel with the wall. So this is just a spacer board going on the bottom side of the panel. Apparently this is the shot where I wanted to hold the panel up to let you know that that's where I put stuff on the back of it. Couple spacer blocks, cleat on top and bottom. Yep, that's that. And I flipped it over so you could see the front side, and you kind of can't see it from this distance, but I wanted that 1/8 of an inch round over on all of the holes, as well as the perimeter. I didn't mention that, so that it kind of gives it a different color around the hole. It kind of makes the holes feel a little bit more visually interesting, if that makes any sense. As I hang it up in this really weird section of our hallway, this little cutout just doesn't really make any sense whatsoever, considering the rest of the rooms around this particular location. So I wanted to experiment with this location by, first off, how does the Tuscan red look with white oak? And it looks okay. I think it would look better if the wood was a little bit lighter. So maybe maple instead of white oak. I think that would look better. That's number one experiment. Experiment number two was, how does this whole project look on a white wall? And kind of not really decided if we love it or hate it, to be honest with you, as far as the color combinations on white. And the third thing was to just get some functional something on the wall. I wanted to put a coat rack up here for a long time, but I wanted something that was a little bit more than just a coat rack. I did not want to put like a bench on the floor to put your shoes on or something, because I didn't want to clutter up this little corner, because you are walking kind of close to this corner going from the hallway to the kitchen. And anyway, it was kind of an experimental space. I do think the function of the project turned out really good, though. This is a little bit of organization, not a whole lot, but a little bit of organization that we've kind of been needing in this space. So thumbs up to that. And with that, I'd like to say, if you want the SketchUp file that I used to create this, I'll have it available for free on my website. If you go to my website, go to jcustomcreations.com/newsletter and sign up for my email newsletter so you don't miss anything that I publish. You guys take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you in the next video.